and then you can maybe start introducing yourself.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see we have 36 participants here so far. Thanks for joining us today. Just a brief introduction of who I am and why I'm doing this. You may have seen my name on under the course description. So one of the things you did not see there, you saw that I graduated from Trenchtown Comprehensive School. Now, it's important, and later on I'll explain why this is important, but it's important to also put in there that I also went to JC. In fact, I did most of my high school years at JC, and I only did a year and about 3 months at Trenchtown. And later on, I'll explain some of the details as to why that's important to the story. But apart from that, so I graduated from Michael Teachers College. I taught in Jamaica. I taught at Bridgeport Secondary, Tarrant Secondary, Trenchtown Comprehensive, where I graduated. And my last place of employment in Jamaica was at Tivoli Comprehensive. So I taught at a few schools there, and then I came here to the US, where I eventually got back in the system, and I've been in since 1997. I got back in, 93, I got back in the system here in New York, and I've been here ever since. I've been from a teaching assistant, and I'm currently doing my 13th year as a school administrator. This is my 7th year as a principal. So the story, what I'm going to show you today is a story about Mallory. But before we get to Mallory's story, this whole story about Mallory evolved as a result of a survey, a research actually by a healthcare provider here in the US called Kaiser Permanente. I should give you a heads up, as I was trying to play with this, I'm usually doing presentations face-to-face. I'm not that tech savvy, and I think I just misplaced some of my slides, including one which had the goals of today's presentation. So ignore me if you might see something seem like it might be a little out of place. I was playing around with the cursor. Things got moved around a little. So this whole thing about ACEs. ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. Now, most of us, we think of childhood experiences, and we think of trauma, first of all, as something that, someone hit you with something. You have a bruise, you have a cut, your body is experiencing trauma. Most of the times we hear about trauma, and we're thinking about something we can see. And that's one aspect of trauma. And believe me, I have quite a few of those. If I were to take off my shirt, I could show you physical trauma that I experienced as a child growing up in Kingston. But that's not the only trauma there is. And most of the time, the students you see in front of you, you cannot see their trauma. They could have physical trauma that's hidden beneath their clothing, but they can have other traumas that are based on emotional and psychological abuses that they receive. And so this is what this presentation looks at, how some of these psychological and emotional abuses and experiences that students come to school with, how they affect them in the classroom, how you can recognize that some of these students are going through some adverse childhood experiences, and some of the ways in which they manifest themselves. This not only helps you to understand your students, but it will help you, as it helped me, to also understand myself. I mean, as long as you grew up in Jamaica, and you all did, you must have gone through some traumatic experiences. So unfortunately, we don't stop to think sometimes that so much just affect us. but it does. And I've found out that it has affected me a lot. So like I said, this research started because of a health provider, Kaiser Permanente. And their goal was actually it was actually research started to look at weight loss in the participants. But by giving them this survey, they gave them a survey, and what they found out is that there were other factors associated with people's behavior other than just the mere fact of gaining weight or losing weight. And eventually this evolved into what they call a survey that they gave, an ACE score survey. Later, I will show you a copy of that survey in more detail. What you see in front of you that you can barely read, it's a 10-question survey dealing with 10 different aspects of things that children go through in their life or could possibly go through. Questions such as if they have parents or family members that were incarcerated, etc. Now, with the ACE survey, the higher the ACE score, from 1 to 10, with each ACE being one, each a childhood experience giving you 1 score, the higher the number of adverse childhood experiences that any student incurs during his or her lifetime, the greater the risk of adverse behaviors. So a lot of times you have students in front of you and they're acting out. Chances are, if they were to do a survey like this, you'll find that they have more than 4 ACEs. In other words, more than 4 of these situations occurred to them. They may have had their family member killed, someone went to prison, they may be physically abused, raped, all different kinds of things. But the higher the number out of 10, the more the dire that child is, the greater the severity of the impact, and these children are more likely to be the ones who are acting out in your classes. So we're going to take a look at some of the things that we actually saw. I'm going to give you some statistics to show you some of the things that actually occurred. So this survey actually took place, and it took place in Washington State. And believe it or not, the participants who were involved in this survey were from upper middle class to high middle class households. They were not people who were in the lower economic status. And sometimes people tend to think that, well, you know, because these adverse effects occur, then these people must be people who are in poverty and they experience a lot of this. And that's the stark thing, most bizarre thing about this is the fact that it occurs with people in upper middle class and high economic status begs us to wonder, what about those who are in the low economic strata? What about the students that we have in Jamaica, many of whom you know come from poverty? How would it affect them? If these affect people who are okay financially, they may have a nice steady household, but there are things going on in their lives. Well, what about the kids in front of you who are from the inner city areas of Kingston or other areas, rural areas in Jamaica, who don't have much at home, may not even have food to eat before they come to school? How much so would something like this have affected them? So we're going to take a look and see how they stack up to compared to with all the different things in their lives. What are the effects that they're having? So the chart you're seeing here, the county that the survey took place was in Snohomish County in Washington State. You can see that Snohomish is in the blue, Washington State is in the red, and the numbers at the bottom are the number of ACEs. As you can see that starting
Mark,
yes.
I'm just going to remind everyone that this is a video conference. So there is a course completion certificate at the end of the course. And if you're interested in the course completion certificate, you do have to have video on to confirm your participation. If you're not interested in the course completion, you don't need to have video, but if you want that certificate, you're gonna have to have video. And that's how we're gonna verify attendance. I just wanted, that was in the email that was sent out. I just wanna remind everyone of that. Sorry to interrupt, Mark, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So what you're seeing is a comparison between one county in blue, Snohomish, and Washington State in general. With one ACE, Snohomish has less than the state in total. When it comes with no ACE, with one, Snohomish went above the state. Two, Snohomish was down. Three, about equal. And once it started reaching at 4 ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, Snohomish County started exceeding the state on a whole. And it goes on up to more than 4. Remember, you can go as far as 10 based on the 10 questions. And this is when things, they started noticing the differences. When they compare now the students with 4 or more ACEs, they start seeing some differences in their behavior. So what are some of the findings of the study? Basically, they found out that ACEs were very common. Like I said, we see our kids in front of us, but we sometimes don't think about what's going on in their lives because we don't know. But it was very common. We found that they were well concealed. So you're not going to see sometimes these students, the behaviors that you see, you have no clue that it's because the child was abused last night, or the child's parent is in prison, or the child constantly see his or her mother being beaten. They conceal these things. It's only through the survey that these ACEs were being discovered. The study also found that the number of categories was more important than the category itself. For example, one of the questions I was asked if the child was sexually abused. The way the survey looks is if 2 or 3 things occurred, that's more important in terms of the behavioral changes than any one thing. So a child who was sexually abused, despite how gruesome that may be, and how much of a trauma that may present to any individual, that was not as crucial as a child who may have had 2 things happen to them. So it's not about which is more important, it's about the number. So someone going to jail, someone being sexually abused, each gets a score of 1. But when you compare, when you put them together, the total number of the categories were more important than the category itself. And it doesn't matter the frequency, by the way. A child who was being raped multiple times was still counted as one category, one incident, versus a child who was physically abused, and at the same time, that same child had a parent who went to jail. So it doesn't matter the frequency, it doesn't matter the category. What was more important is the number of categories that the person scored. So here are the sciences now behind the ACEs. And like as Kimon said earlier, by the way, if at any time you need any further clarification, feel free to stop me. So the science behind ACE is that the child's environment shapes the behavior. We all know that. We see that every day. What we probably did not know is that it also shapes the child's health. And not just the child's health, it shapes our human health, childhood all the way to adulthood. Our brain is designed to prioritize survival. We all know that. We all know about the fight or flight syndrome behavior. Cortisol Whenever we're in a situation where our body tells us what to do, how to defend ourselves, and it releases cortisol. Cortisol decides and tells us, do we fight this, or do we fight, or run from it, or do we freeze? This is what it does. Now, another thing you should also be aware of is that cortisol, it's a stress hormone, and it's also that stress hormone that you may have heard often talked about, that it causes you to put on weight. So here, a child who is experiencing adverse effects in his or her life, that child is getting a lot of cortisol released. That child is going to react based on the cortisol. That child may be the one in your class who curses, who is quick to fight. That child may be the one who doesn't mind leaving class, not coming back. That's a flight. That child may even be the one who just starts putting on weight. All of this is because of the cortisol created by the stress. So, and all of this takes them into adulthood and affects their overall health. Now, I should also add that when we talk about ACE, we should always know they always travel in more than one. Very rarely would you see a person who has exhibited or recorded that they had experiences with zero. They have never had any adverse experience. Once you find a child who has had at least one, there is something else. So more than likely, you're going to find in your classrooms children who have had more than one ACEs in their life, adverse childhood experiences. And like I said, the more, the worse they will behave in terms of trying to get out of situation. They will act up. They may not see the need for school. They may not even see the need to be around, to be in existence. So the more, the more severe it is. So be aware of that. Now, I mentioned to you earlier about my going to JC. And yes, I passed my common entrance and I went to JC. I spent 4 years there. But of the 4 years from first form to fourth form, I was in JC. If I were to add the number of days I actually went to JC, it probably would come out to be 2 years. And that was because of the experiences I had as a child at home in Kingston 30 on Walton Park Road with my father. And I share that with you because looking at me today, being a school principal, someone who has reached the level of attaining a doctorate degree, most people would not look at me to tell that, well, this person has had these ACEs in his life. But when I took the survey myself, when I looked at the survey, the one I will share with you later, of these 10 questions, there's only one there that I missed. So I scored 9 out of these 10. And I share this with you because, yes, we do look okay. We function okay. But we also function at times, depending on the circumstance, based on how our brain has been programmed, what we were programmed to do to defend ourselves. As a child, I would go to school when I was at JC. And once I'm there, the few days I was there, I would act out in class. I was not a bad kid looking back at it, but I think I have the record for the most caning per term. I think in one term I got caned almost every day. And it's just since I got older, I realized that when I went back to school each time after being out for a week or 2 or a month or 2, every time I went back to class, I just had to be seen for everyone to know I was there. I didn't realize at the time what I was doing, but that was my acting out. But it was based on my experience, my childhood experiences. So it shapes the way we behave, we react with each other, we react with teachers, and the same students you have in front of you on a given day, any given day, you can actually look and see based on their behavior, there are other things going on in their lives. And so when at the end of this, I will have the ACEs calculator, that 10 question survey put up so you can have a copy of it. And you can be free to use it with your students. Actually, it's not mine. It's actually on the internet. Use it with your students and you'll realize that, you know, the students that you have who are acting out the most are some of the most, the students who have had the most adverse experiences. And that will help you to understand, okay, how you deal with that.
Sorry to interrupt. We have a question from Bashford Reed. Bashford, I've unmuted you. Go ahead and ask the question.
Yes, Bashford.
Are you there? All right, well, we wait for Bashford. He's not on mute, but I'm not hearing him either. Anybody else have any questions? Just raise your hand in Zoom. There's a little hand icon where you see the list of names at the very bottom. You can raise your hand. All right, Harvell, I'm going to unmute you. You have a question, Harvell?
All right, good evening, everyone.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
All right, so we are seeing where students, they obviously based on how they are acting out, and we don't want to stereotype, but how they are acting out, they are disruptive, they are disrespectful. Some don't see school as important, and you realize that they are just out of it. And when you really get to speak to them, you hear that, you know, they lost their parents through violent activities. I'm hungry, sir. My family don't love me. So they act out for attention. The traditional educational system, however, yes, you have your guidance counselors and so on, but I don't see a clear path of help, of reform for most of these students. This is a tool we can now use, ACEs, but how else would you suggest that we try to save these youngsters?
Well, later on, I'll be getting into a few details, just a few nuggets of things you can do. But I'll tell you this, though, right off the bat, the very first thing that you can do to save these students is what you're doing now. You're getting the information that sometimes what these students are doing, they're not doing it because they hate you. They're not doing it because they hate school. They're not doing it because they hate the subject. They're doing it because that's their defense mechanism. Now, it's important to note, too, that students who have been programmed to behave a certain way because of this fight or flight or freeze mode, that's their defense mechanism. They have adapted to survive in their home environment, but not necessarily elsewhere. So coming to school, it's not like home. It's not like out on the street. Out on the street, and we talk about students who are street smart. That's how they survive. But when they come to school, it's a different environment. They cannot code switch and start acting differently because that's who they have become. That's their survival mechanism. So the first thing you can do, and which you're doing now, is understanding your students, that there are things affecting them. And it's not necessarily that they hate you, they hate the subject, or they hate coming to school. It's just that this is their defense mechanism. This is how they have evolved. This is who they have become. And in order for us to help them, we have got to first get to know them. And like I said, later on, I'll show you a few nuggets of things that you can do to start to get to know them or get to them. So, as we move on, and if you have any other question along, anyone else, jump in at any time. So here we have this side, that toxic stress derails.
Anything.
Hello? Are you hearing me?
Yes, do you have a question?
This is Janet. I have a question. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you,
Yes.
Janet.
Okay, all right. What about a case where a student who has gone through more than one of these traumas, but instead of acting out in class, he or she just shuts down, meaning that they are quiet during the whole sessions. But when they do tests, they do very well. But if you ask them why they are so quiet and they confide in you, you realize that they have gone through a whole lot. Is this leading to any mental thing? Because they just keep everything inside?
It is possible. It is possible that sometimes, you know, they're shutting themselves away. They may need to have counseling sessions with a social worker, psychologist, because sometimes, again, like I said, it's not that they hate school. They may be, as you say, good students academically, but they just feel that the world is on, they're kind of weight of the world on their shoulders. And yes, they may retreat within themselves. Some of these kids may eventually develop serious mental health issues that may need to be addressed. Some of them may eventually, with the right, making the right connections with people around them, students and staff, may eventually get out of it. But we can't leave that to chance. We have got to try to get to the root of the issue and address it, because the last thing we want is to lose a child because we assumed that it's temporary or they'll overcome it eventually, and they may never do so. So, like I said, the best thing you do, get to know your children, know what they're going through, empathize with them. And as long, every child really needs to have what we call a mother elephant, or in case a father elephant, someone who looks out for them, who can take care of them, who can be nice to them, who cannot be as punitive with every little situation, but more giving them some counseling. Every child yearns for that. So, and you're welcome. And as this slide says, toxic stress derails healthy development. So it goes right with your question. Healthy development, so someone who retreats within him or herself, that's not healthy. It could be the precursor to serious mental health issues. But the toxic stress that that person is going through can derail positive health. So we need to make sure that we are addressing these toxic stress issues. Some of the things that toxic stress does, and we mentioned cortisol, which is toxic. Cortisol makes permanent changes to your brain. We never stop to think about that. But we talk about cortisol being that fat hormone that causes you to gain weight. It also changes the brain permanently. Once changed, it can't be unchanged. So we want to address whatever these issues are, so this cortisol is limited. When your body is under stress, it produces this hormone cortisol. The more stress, the more cortisol. A doctor once said to me, he said that the healthcare system is they're not telling us the truth. They tell us that heart attack may be the #1 killer. They tell us about this and that and so on. He said the truth is the #1 killer is stress. That almost everything else, all the illnesses we have, is caused by stress. And so the more stress you have, your years of life expectancy is being reduced. So cortisol, it makes permanent changes to your brain, and that includes in probably the way you act, the things you do. Kids who take more risk, kids who are not afraid to die, because their brain sometimes the wiring is all gone bad. And so we need to take that in consideration, because the longer they're in that state, the worse the brain is going to get damaged. And sometimes, unfortunately, we will lose them. So you may encounter young people seem perfectly suited to survive at home environment, as I mentioned before, but won't survive in a classroom. It's not their environment. And if you think about it, it's almost a not to reduce a child to an animal, but it's almost the same as if you take an animal from one environment that they're used to and you put them somewhere else. That's not their environment. They just will not function. They may even die because of the stress that it's causing on them. But we have to be aware of toxic stress. So to recognize the brain development and these trauma, some of your students, you mentioned, Janet, that the student might retreat within him or herself. Another could be that the student might be hypervigilant, always on the ready. If you just say, take your seat, that child wants to have a big argument about it. Because they're so used to being told what to do or things being demanded of them that they are always poised, waiting to attack, to defend themselves. So these students are hypervigilant. The slightest thing, they'll fight. Some of them have this space symptom of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. They cannot pay attention. They cannot sit still. They have to keep moving around. That's just who they are. They're just not able, their brain is just not able for them to be wired the same way like everyone else is. And so they're going to be so active that sometimes it might seem difficult for you to get what you want to get across to them because their brain cannot focus. Yes, Janet? Did you have a question, Janet?
So you can,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark. We'll pause for questions. Yeah.
Okay. So then another thing is early onset of sexualized behaviors. Now, like I said, and I deliberately named those schools I taught because those are those are inner city schools. And I've seen a lot of these behaviors there. I did not know what they were and why, but you know the students you have now. They're no different today than they were then. They might even be worse now because there might be more stressful situations today. I have the same things here with students here. They get very promiscuous. Again, these are life-threatening behaviors. With promiscuity, the possibility of these diseases, including fatal diseases. So it's as if they really don't care. They don't stop to think about it. They take a lot of risks. They don't mind because they can't think the way you and I would think. They can't think like a normal person would because, again, the brain is already being rewired. It's being permanently damaged. They're more impulsive. They can be aggressive, disruptive, and including to many of them are being suspended and arrested. And sometimes the truth is, and as a principal, I'll be the first to tell you and admit, it's the easiest way of fixing the problems in the school, suspending the kids. But it does not fix the kids. It simply just delay the problem until the kid comes back from suspension. But it does fix it temporarily for us. It's the easier way of fixing it. But it's not a permanent fix. The behavior is still going to be there that causes that kind of behavior. And so this is something we do, but we're not serving the need of a kid when we do so. And these students just cannot tolerate stress. You give them a test and it's too stressful. You will hear that all the time. I can't do this. So other negative effects of toxic stress: impaired cognitive performance, weakened immune system, hyperglycemia, their fatigue, excessive thirst and urination, decreased bone density, decrease in muscle tissue, high blood pressure, slower healing, other health issues, an increased risk of physical and mental health problems. And we talked about that earlier, that the kids could actually be on the threshold of having mental health issues. These are all some of the consequences of toxic stress. Things we never thought of. We just figured that, you know, somebody's stressed out, it will go away, but it causes things to affect your body more than we think. So here we have risk behaviors. This chart just shows you the risk behavior. As the ACEs would be on the bottom, and you notice the greater the ACEs, as you move towards the right, the response gets higher. More behavioral issues occur the more the ACEs, from 1 to 10. So the greater the dose gets bigger, the dose of ACEs, the number of ACEs you have, the greater the responses, the behaviors. There's a definite correlation there. The same thing here. And this is just an analogy. Put it in terms of, let's say if you saw, this is a car and you put gas in it. The more gas you put in there, the greater the miles you can drive. Miles you can drive simply means all the behavioral issues. So the more the stress, the further. This is just another way to look at it. And we're going to go through a few life behaviors that affect that kids exhibit that also, and I mentioned before, that it follows you through your adulthood and can even lead to premature death. And these are some of the effects of these adverse childhood experiences. Kids increase in smoking. A kid with 0 ACE is about 30% chance of smoking. A kid with, say, 4 to 5, it's up to about 55%. See, the greater the ACE down here, the ACE scores, the greater the possibility that that child will start smoking. 6, 7, or 8, that child is over 60%. So you can just imagine if the child has 10, where that's heading. The chart keeps going up. The more the ACEs, the greater the behavior of smoking. This one is for alcoholism. Say the same thing, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. The higher the number of ACEs, and again, remember, it is not the frequency, or it's not the category, it's the number of episodes, different ACEs, different traumas, experiences. So 4 more of those experiences, 16% possibility of becoming alcoholic. And that's, by the way, in adulthood. So these behaviors, the seed takes them through not just childhood, but adulthood. This became personal to me when I did this, because I started taking a look at myself and, okay, how this affects me. Chronic depression. Red is men, blue women. The higher the ACE, you can see both men and women. The more the ACE, the more the chance of chronic depression. That child who was silent in class probably is also depressed. And who knows, maybe 4 more ACEs. Interestingly, women are more averse, women are more inclined to be depressed, chronically depressed, than males, but both increase with the number of ACEs. Risk of perpetrating domestic violence. As a child, I saw a lot of this personally at home. And you can see it here with men and with women. The greater the ACE, you see the chance of being a domestic violent person is increasing. And this in itself, whether it's something happening between husband and wife at home, as long as the child seeing this, the child will also be affected by it. And if the child sees it, that can also add to the child becoming a domestic abuser also. So the trend speaks for itself. The higher the ACEs, the greater the chance of something happening. This one is attempted suicide. Students with 4 ACEs are about 18% likely to attempt to commit suicide. The lower, 0, is about 2%, 1 is about 3%, 2, 5, 3, about 11, and 4 is all the way up to 18%. Think about it if you have someone who scored 8 or 9. So again, some of the risk factors, and we spoke about that. When we talk about severe obesity, I mentioned that, I alluded to that. Cortisol, more cortisol will add to obesity. Drug use, depression, etc. 30 or more sexual partners, again, risky behaviors, and these behaviors tend to go into your adulthood. So with the ACE score of 0, the majority of adults have few, if any, risk factors. That is clear. But with 4 or more, the majority of adults have multiple factors for diseases and diseases themselves. So this is adults now, okay? And these things started at childhood, adverse childhood experiences. So the things that happened to us when we were kids continue to happen to us when we're adults. And not until we get to understand them, get to know what's going on, then we are at serious risk of dying young, because we are going to allow some of these factors to affect us. ACEs impact in the classroom in this county. It's more special education students. Students were repeating grades. Students were having problems at school. This could be happening in any school in Jamaica. Again, this was conducted with middle-income students. We know, you and I know, we have a lot of students in poverty in Jamaica. So imagine what that's doing to them. So I'm going to tell you a story about Mallory. And Mallory could be any student you have. You can picture Mallory as one of your students in your classroom. And this is who Mallory is, an 8th grade student in Tivoli, in Tarrant, in Trenchtown. Well, Trenchtown no longer exists. So that too is causing my ACE score to go up, because my high school no longer exists. So it's causing stress on me too. So I have to now, I'd say that JC is my school, because otherwise I don't have a high school, even though I didn't graduate from JC. So we should always keep in mind that ACE travels in cluster. Once someone has one, chances are there's another. If they have 2, they may have 3. Very rarely you find a person who only has 1 ACE. So 84% of students reported at least 2 additional ACEs, okay, among people exposed to physical abuse. So this is right now, this is 3 right here. So they were physical abuse, they have at least 2 more. So this 84% of people have at least 3 ACEs. So Mallory's grades, and you know these students, you see them every day, grades plummeting, they don't really care, okay? They get grades C, D's, and F's. Well, sometimes they're not in school. When they're in school, they're not focused, they have attention deficit. There's bullying and safety at school. They may bully people. They may feel they are not safe. People who are nearly twice as likely to report being a victim of bullying. They're more likely to report missing days of school because they felt unsafe. 8th graders like Mallory indicate that they had been physically abused by an adult world. These are the things that they do. So, you know, once something happens at home, it affects them throughout school. You have been seeing that. So Mallory seems disengaged in school. She always looks tired. She can't seem to remember facts from 10 minutes ago. ADHD, attention deficit. So for 10 minutes, it's all gone. So these students, you know them, you see them in your classes every day. You can pick on any, like I said, you can find your own Mallory. So our personal solution, and you have students like these who find their solutions to their problem. They're more likely to report alcoholic use and marijuana use. They self-medicate. They're 4 times more likely to indicate any other type of current drug use, including marijuana. So they're using this to medicate themselves. That's their solution to the problem. I've had students who tell me that they, when they smoke weed, yeah, it makes them feel better. They can focus, they can concentrate, because that's what they feel. They are medicating themselves. So in every classroom, here in the US, there in Jamaica, in 1 in 4 8th graders have reported ACEs. 1 in 4. So a quarter of your class has some ACEs. Hence the disruption in school. If you have 25% of your class who cannot sit still, who has all these things coming to you, it's difficult for you to teach. It's difficult for others to learn because they cannot focus. They just cannot function. They're in the wrong environment. They're programmed for elsewhere, but now they're in school. So the effects of ACEs in school, low school engagement, you see the numbers. With the greater the ACE, the higher the percentage of students who are not able to engage in school. Like I said, guys, this is research. This is fact. This is one example, but it can fluctuate. This was from middle income family background. In a poor neighborhood, an inner city school, chances are it could be far worse. The statistics could go through the roof. Kids who do not finish school or who did not finish anything they started, the more the ACEs, they just cannot continue. They're preoccupied. Externalizing behavior, fights, arguing with the teachers, name calling, things like these, things that, you know, kids blurt out things in your classroom. They have things going on, and that's their defense mechanism. They are hypervigilant. So they have these externalizing behaviors. They externalize it. You see these behaviors, but you're wondering, where's this coming from? Why is this person so violent? This is where it's coming from. Just to go through just a few more of these. I know we're running short of time. Also contacted due to problems at school. When I was in Jamaica, it was difficult to contact homes because there was no phone phones weren't as prevalent as it is today. Here in the US, we do call home regularly, but I'm certain if you are communicating with parents on a regular basis, it's the same students. And when you find that it's the same students, you check and see, and you'll find out that their ACE scores are way up there. Those students, the higher the ACE, those are the students that you're more communicating with at home because of these behaviors. Their effect in school, they repeat in grades. The more ACE, the more the chance of these students repeating grade or having to repeat their exams. In the justice system, this was taken from the Florida juvenile justice system, and again, it was done by versus Kaiser Permanente, the people who did the study, and they saw that based on what Kaiser Permanente found, that the students they did this with, the people that did this with, their numbers, 2 or more, 0, 1, 2, and it starts going down. But in Florida justice system, you see the number of students with ACEs here start going up. From 0, the more ACE, the more students in the Florida justice system. So the little behaviors that end up land them in jail, they don't care. They feel like there's nothing to live for. They get despondent. And this is just a comparison of females and males, how they stack up from 0 to 10, the number of ACEs in terms of who goes through the justice system. And again, these are some of the different kinds of traumas that they may go through. I told you about the 10 traumas. And you see the number based on what the trauma is, how many of these students reported these traumas. This is just a percentage of these traumas that they went through, males and females. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up shortly. So what you need to know that populations who are at risk, that the different rates of the condition are exposed to population and unexposed population. So you have a lot of students, some of whom you will not necessarily see acting up, but there are some who will be acting up quite severely. And these students are really affected. They have been exposed to serious health risks because of their behaviors or things that have been happening to them at home. And here are some of the risk factors. Smoking, 70% of them smoke, 21% who smoke, it's caused by ACE. Drug use, illicit drug, that is 67% of them who have illicit drug use, it's caused by ACE. 31% say it's not caused by their ACEs. So the majority, alcoholism, of the 100% of them who reported alcoholism, 96% of them, 0.897, it's because of their ACE. 3.2%, no, not really. Maybe they were just following their friends, peer pressure. But 97% of them are using it to self-medicate themselves. So these are the kind of things that have caused students to have serious life-changing experiences and lessens their lifespan. So suicide, if a student has one as half ACE, they said half, half of a person who has 1 out of 100, 1 out of 100 people reported 0 ACE attempt suicide. So of 100 people, if they have 0, 1 of them will attempt suicide. If there are 100 people who have 3 ACEs, 10 of them will attempt suicide. And if there are 100 people who have 7 ACEs, 20 of them will attempt suicide. So it's still 100, but the higher the ACE, 0, 3, 7, the more the number of people will attempt suicide. So to get back to the question that was earlier asked, some of the things that we could do, these are some what we call kernels. Physical play. We need to increase child's physical ability to have healthy relationships. We have non-directive play. Parents sit beside the child, describe out loud what the child is doing, improves relationship with parents, etc. Now, this is something probably at home, at the school, something we can act as parents in the absence of the parent themselves. So some of these things, we spend more time with kids, we bond with them, we let them know that we care about them. Some of these may actually change their outlook on life, change their behavior. This is a breathing exercise and probably best for elementary school. We used to do this. Sometimes you have your class, you do stretch exercise. My teachers used to do this when I was at primary school. I went to Russell Primary. Just breathing exercise to get them to relax, etc. Simple exercise, a simpler thing. I didn't know the value of it. They probably knew that it would help me to relax. And this is basically what this is trying to do, get them to relax. Praise your children. We all do that as educators. When we see them do something good, we praise them. Increase positive friendship, encourage them to have positive friendships and relationship. Increase sense of safety, increase volunteering, increase behaviors you want to see more of. And these are some of the things, you know, parents have to play a role into. I know sometimes it's difficult as schools, it seems like we have the world, we have to be responsible for the children, but at the end of the day, you know, parents are not always going to do it. We have to do what we can to help them. But the bottom line I want us to take away from all of this is that our students are who they are. They are coming to us because of what happened to them in their childhood, and we have to get them back some way, somehow. And so there are three things that are suggested here, four things that you can do. But the last thing I want to take away a person's solution before they discover a better one. And you're just digging a hole for them to fall back into. So if you take away the person's solution before they discover a better one, we're not helping them. We have to try to give them a solution to the problem. Don't just take away one and have nothing to replace it with. So that's the bottom line. At the end of the day, we are their parents when they are not at home. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that this is who they are. This is their environment that they have adapted to. And we want to keep them safe. And ultimately, we want them to learn. And because they're the next generation that we are depending on them to take care of us later on. So, any questions?
All right, so we're gonna open up the mute 1 second, and then if you could just listen out and ask your question, and then wait for a pause. All right, so everyone is off mute now. Go ahead with the first question. Does somebody have a question? Ionette, a question, or Mickey? Nisha, you have a question?
In the case of a child who has resorted to smoking as their form of relief of the stress, is there anything that you would recommend that we could put in place to help that child?
Well, first of all, you have to find out why they're smoking. You got to know their aces. You have to know what's happening at home. Once we know what's happening, then we can then substitute by helping them to overcome that issue. It could be a simple thing such as having someone to talk to. They might be smoking because it offers them, let's say smoking weed, for example. It offers them an escape from reality. But maybe what they really need is to talk to a counselor, a psychologist, to face the reality, to get to learn some coping skills. So we have to first got to address what the issues are. That you cannot take away a solution from them without having something to replace it. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. You may want
Okay.
to repeat that part because there was some background noise.
Okay, so as I was saying, so you may want to just find out what is the problem, what's causing them to, what's going on at home, because they could be just trying to mask what's happening to them. And then, oh, I guess that the kid is ready for dinner. All right, so, and you may want to just guide them to someone with whom they may speak, to teach them some coping skills to face the problems and to be able to address it appropriately. I also must stress too that remember, you don't want to take away a solution if you don't have one to replace it. You can't just say you need to stop smoking. That doesn't help. But what can I do instead? So guide them to somewhere where they can talk to someone and face the issue, and who may give them the right mechanism to deal with that particular issue that's affecting them. So there's no one answer for it. You have to know what the problem is that they're trying to escape, and guide them to someone who can give them some coping skills to deal with that issue. Anyone else? You're welcome.
Just raise your hand if you have a question. I'll unmute you.
And in the meantime, I put up some resources here if you can that you can actually go to, and you can find some information on ACEs here.
Okay. So go ahead. Who has the next question? I see Ionette, Samantha, Tanisha.
Samantha, all right. Asked your question already.
Okay, great.
Can I go ahead?
The next question? Yes, go ahead.
All right. Through the presentation, it's quite informative. I have had some things I've seen those same stuff in my students, but we look at what can be done really children. How do we get administration to buy into all of this?
That's a great question. The first thing that you need to do is get your administrator to understand ACEs. Sit with them, talk to them. If they want some resources, copy down these resources, share it with them. The truth is, even here in America, this is not widely known. And it will not help if you are trying to do one thing and the administrator is trying to do something else. I mentioned earlier that the easiest way of solving a problem in the classroom, and I put solving in quotes, is to suspend. But it may solve that problem for a day or two or a week, but the child will come back to school. Like I said, I have probably a record at JC for the most caning in a term. Between Rural Taylor, the principal, Mr. Hazel, the vice principal, and Mr. Cummings, the other vice principal, I got almost a caning a day for an entire term. But I did it every time I got caning. I'm there back the very next day. My behavior didn't change. And during that time, my mother was here in the US. My father just had us, the kids, and he took out his vengeance on us. And there were times when I was away from school for months because my father would burn my uniform. He would cut up every single piece of clothes that I had. The only one he would miss sometimes would be the ones that were on my back because I was wearing them and I had to run. And I was out of school. So when I went back, my behaviors continued. So suspending me from school would not have fixed the issues because the issues were at home. What I needed were someone to be talking to me, to understand what's going on, and to give me some strategies. So you got to talk to your principal, the administration. You got to encourage them. You got to nurture some of these kids. Take them under your wings. Be a mother or papa elephant, as I said, and advocate for them. Be some of these students' advocates. Sometimes, you know what? That's what they need because the parents are not doing it. I would have loved to have a teacher who advocated for me because I didn't have that family, that parental figure at home. My mom was here in the US My father was in Jamaica and he was so abusive. So be an advocate for the kids, an advocate when it comes to your administrator on behalf of your students.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Yes, good afternoon. Can I ask the question now?
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Adela Newell here. I am apologizing for my camera. I don't know how to turn it to the front camera. However, my question is, if you have identified a problem, but this child really shuts down, doesn't speak in any at all, how do you treat a situation?
Okay, first of all, I always tell my staff that, you know, there's certain limitations to what we can do depending on your area of expertise. As a classroom teacher, your biggest thing is to advocate for your child. And next to that, then you need to find the right support system to put in place for this child. That child, you might not know how to get that child to talk to you, but maybe a psychologist will, or a guidance counselor, or a social worker, because they have those extra tools in their arsenal and based on their line of training that they can actually help these students. Maybe it's not something, we all have different levels of interaction with students and different areas of expertise and strengths. So I would suggest something like that. Obviously, there's something deep and emotional going on. It could even be to the point where it's now mental illness, onset mental illness. But as a classroom teacher or even an administrator, would not be able to diagnose that. It would take a psychologist or a social worker to give them a battery of different tests that they have, that they use regularly to determine what is the issue and how best to help these students. So your best bet is to be the advocate and guide them to the right resources that can give them the help they need.
Okay, I did all of that. I had spoke to the parents. I have referred this child to the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor still cannot get this child to speak. However, we would have identified that there is a problem and we may know what the problem is, but this child is not saying anything, and therefore the guidance counselor now is in limbo as to what to do next.
Sometimes it takes time. It takes time. It takes a lot of trust, a lot of nurturing, a lot of demonstration that you care, a lot of patience. There's no overnight fix for any of this. Sometimes it takes longer than others. So be the best nurturer you can and advocate for that child. Stick close to the child. Just show the child love. Love is probably the best remedy for anything. And if a child sees that you're displaying love towards them, eventually they may decide to open up. But you can't rush it. It will happen when the child feels that it's time to happen, as long as the child feels that he or she trusts you. But again, there's no easy solution to any of this by any means whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Just keep doing your best.
Thanks.
All
You're
right,
welcome.
so we're at 15 minutes after. I've copied in the classroom assessment in the chat window. So it's in Zoom. You want to go to the chat window and you want to take a few minutes now to complete the assessment. Completion of the assessment is required to receive course completion certificate. So let me know if you have any problems accessing the link. Just go to that chat window at the bottom and just click on the link and complete the assessment. So thank you so much, Mark, for this session. The next session will start at 4:30 EST. So you can get a few minutes break, maybe get some water, and then we're
my water here.
Okay, so we're going to keep this line open for the next group of attendees. And for this group of attendees, please complete the assessment.
Okay, great.
Any final words, Mark, for this first group?
Well, I just want to say thank you guys for participating. Thanks for the work that you're doing down there. You know, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm not there, but I still keep abreast as much as I can with what's going on in Jamaica. It's the land, my birthplace, it's my country, and the place that I'm actually looking forward to retire and return to. In fact, I'm coming down later this month, starting to look somewhere to live down there. So I do appreciate all the things that you're doing down there to nurture the next generation of Jamaicans and whatever we can do for our country. It's greatly appreciated. So God bless you and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Before you go, can you tell me how you find the chat? The link to answer the question. In Zoom, in the corner, you should see a chat window with right below everybody's name, and people right now are typing messages. Okay. So go to the right. I'm there, and it's like a box that says chat. Yes. You don't see it? Yes, I found it. All right. So then the link at the top is again. You have to scroll up to find the link. At the top, and I can't find it. Send it again. Hold on. Do you see it now? So I just send the link again. Okay. Thank you. All right. So everyone, you should have the classroom assessment link in the chat. So if you've completed the assessment, you can go ahead and log off. Thank you for joining. We will share the content. If you're registered and you attended, we will share the content. Make sure you complete the assessment in the chat link. And if you're early for the next session, just hold on. The next session starts at 4:30. So you can, if you're waiting for the next session, you can, just hold on for another 10 minutes or so and we'll get started. And for those of you in the first session, to complete the assessment and log off.
Okay. Hello?
Hello,
okay.
yes.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
The question about which session you attended.
Yes, I'm late.
It's not giving an option and it's not allowing me to submit.
Them would have to unmute you. Remember, everybody mute.
So the options are classroom.
And everybody.
I opted for hello.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead and try again. Just refresh the page and try again.
Okay. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I opted for the 4 o'clock session. I seem to be late because, so what do I do? Wait for the other session and join that one and then do the assessment?
Yes.
I have the same